right, Hemispheric Neutrality, 1939 to 1941. So this is talking about what happens after war has been declared in Europe and by the Canadians. Now, the United States wants to stay the heck out of this conflict. They do not want to be involved in European affairs. This time, though, it is important to understand that Roosevelt, the President of the United States, realizes that the United States needs to be able to defend themselves because there is a threat, a very, very major threat. And although the United States is officially neutral, they are certainly not neutral when it comes to morality. They want to make sure that Germany loses this war. So Roosevelt sees the need to create a two-ocean navy. Now, we're talking about kind of the idea of manifest destiny, where the people believe the United States has a God-given right to go from sea to shining sea, Pacific to Atlantic Ocean. So because of that, they need to have a two-ocean navy. It doesn't really do you any good when you have your entire Navy fleet in the Atlantic Ocean if you have an attack on the Pacific side. You need to have a navy on both sides. So this is something that Roosevelt really, really wants to make sure he has. Roosevelt's also seeing the threat of the Japanese in the Pacific, meaning you've got to be able to take care of the threat from the Germans on the Atlantic side and the Japanese on the Pacific side. Though most isolationist politicians are going to support this policy. Isolationist politicians really don't want to get involved in the conflict in Europe and Asia. They want to stay the heck out of it, though they also realize it's not really a bad idea to make sure you've got a two-ocean navy and to make sure your country is defended. So they're going to be supporting Roosevelt and this belief and this proposal he's going to bring to Congress for the most part. Now, we're going to get the invasion of Poland again in September 1st, 1939. And this is going to make Roosevelt go to Congress, okay? Roosevelt sees this as a threat. Roosevelt feels that something must be done. Again, talking about previously how this idea of appeasement, Roosevelt's like, this is stupid. We're not going to be doing this. It's not working. Sends his letter to Hitler. Hitler makes a mockery of him. Roosevelt, when he goes to Congress, he's basically going to be saying that our neutrality and our just staying out of this situation is causing legitimate governments to fall. Okay, the legitimate government of Poland is no longer there because we're not willing to help them. We're going to have this illegitimate Nazi government coming in and taking control because we're not doing anything. This is kind of akin to someone saying, like, this kid's getting beaten up over and over and over again, and we can stop it, or we can just sit here and let this kid keep getting beaten up. You tell me what we're going to do. What's the right thing to do? So this is going to be causing the creation of cash and carry. Now, the cash and carry is going to allow for the shipment of arms to countries involved in war, getting kind of rid of some of this neutrality acts that required the no selling of weapons of war to countries involved in a crisis, and allow for this to happen if that country is going to arrange the shipping. So it's kind of a bit of a compromise. Roosevelt wants to get involved, not officially declare war, but make sure we're helping and supporting those legitimate governments. But isolationists are afraid of doing this. So the compromise is we'll let them have these weapons, but they need to make sure they are going to be shipping them. Also, though, Roosevelt kind of knows the politics of the situation, and he knows that by doing this, it's going to prevent Germany from getting American weapons because Germany lacked cash. Okay, remember previously we were talking about Germany and their trade with Brazil, where they're giving them German, basically like IOU marks. That's what Germany can pay, and the Americans aren't going to be accepting those. You can pay us in cash, or you aren't going to get our stuff. So by doing this, they ensure that these weapons are going to only the countries they support and not to the Germans. It's a compromise between neutrality and getting involved, and everyone is happy except for the Nazis, as it should be. Now, April 1940, Germans are going to take Denmark, Norway, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and they're going to attack France. So people are realizing at this point that Hitler is on a mission to take over Europe, and this is going to be problematic. In the United Kingdom, Chamberlain is going to lose his election. Winston Churchill is going to be elected, and he's immediately going to go and he is going to form a war cabinet. He's going to realize that there is a major crisis going on. We have got to get involved. We have got to be ready to fight. France is going to be quickly defeated. At this time, the United Kingdom is now going to be alone in their resistance to Hitler. Okay, they're alone in their resistance to the Germans in Europe. It is now Hitler and the rest of Europe versus the United Kingdom. They are totally reliant on outside nations, as I was talking about with the Canadians, and the Canadian shipping routes. The United Kingdom, if they want to survive as a country, they need to rely on outside nations. If they don't have that outside nation support, they are going to cease to exist as a country. The United States or the United Kingdom is totally relied on trade with the Americas through shipping, as I've already talked about. German submarines are going to try to intervene and stop this from happening. They're going to say that they will attack any ship trading with the United Kingdom, hence the importance of the convoys, the Canadians and their major role in this, the Americans and their role. American vessels were hit, Brazilian vessels were hit, Mexican vessels were hit. So the Germans are sinking American, Brazilian, and Mexican ships. Even though those countries are officially neutral and not at war, they're also going to be attacking Canadian ships, but the Canadians have declared war, so it's a little bit different circumstance right through there. But ultimately, the United States, Brazil, and Mexico are going to remain neutral, even though German submarines are attacking their shipping routes with the United Kingdom. Now, Latin America is going to be ambivalent towards Germany. Okay, for the most part, you're going to have, again, a large German population in parts of Latin America, which means they're a little bit more lenient and kind of opposed to going to war against Germany. We're going to have Germany, which helped a lot of these Latin American countries out of the Great Depression. So it's kind of like, hey, thanks for helping me out when I was struggling. Peru had previously had soldiers training with German officers, so there's a bit of a military cooperation between them. And these countries view that the best way to protect the interest of Latin America solely, not the United States, but to protect the interest of Latin America, was to remain neutral. If for some reason the Germans end up winning this crisis and we win against them, we're going to be in a really bad position. If the Germans end up losing and we didn't really necessarily go against them, but we didn't support them, we're going to be in an okay position. We're just going to make sure we take care of ourselves, not get involved in this conflict, and hopefully it will all go away soon. All right, then we get the election of 1940 when President Franklin D. Roosevelt runs for and wins his third term as president. Now, this is a break with tradition. At this time, there was no constitutional amendment keeping the president of the United States from running for a third term. Roosevelt is going to break with this tradition and run for this term. Now, this is going to be important because it's going to show how afraid Americans were of being unprotected in the war. They realized there was a crisis going on in Europe and the Pacific, and there was a good chance the United States was going to get involved. They did not feel that this was a good time to have a change of leadership. They felt that Roosevelt had a pretty good control on protecting the United States, and thus Roosevelt is going to win in a very, very large landslide of the election of 1940. Churchill is going to then write President Roosevelt, where he simply states, the United Kingdom cannot afford to pay for supplies anymore. We are broke. We are struggling. We're out of luck, basically. You got to help us out or we're going to cease to exist and the Germans are going to come take us over. Now, this is going to lead to the development of the Lynd Lease Act. Now, the Lynd Lease Act states the United States could sell, lend, or lease weapons to different countries if it benefited the United States of America. So we have gone in a matter of about a year from the Neutrality Acts of not sending any weapons to these countries at all to sending these weapons to these countries if they arrange the payment, to lending, selling, or leasing these weapons to these countries if the benefit is to the United States. Now, this is kind of the equivalent of if there is a fire going on, okay, burning 3 houses down, you know it's going to jump to your neighbor's house, which isn't going to jump to your house. You might as well put out the fire on your neighbor's house, let him borrow your hose to fight the fire so that it doesn't even get to your house in the first case. That's exactly what they're trying to do here. I'm going to give you what you need because it's also protecting our interest. We're going to be taken care of if you are taken care of. So here, take what you need. Pay for them later if you can. If not, it's okay because it's also benefiting the United States. We're good to go. So do understand the major change between Neutrality Act to this one right here, up to the Lynd Lease Act. Now, going on, Canada is kind of worried about the Lynd Lease Act because they feel that it's going to be hurting Canada economically. They're afraid that this is going to be hurting us because these countries aren't buying stuff anymore, meaning we can't produce these things. We're going to be suffering economically, and this is not a time for us to suffer economically. There's a major war going on. So we're going to get the Hyde Park Declaration. Now, the Hyde Park Declaration allows for U.S. materials made in Canada to be included in the Lynd Lease Act. This is going to be another example of this relationship between the United States and Canada, particularly when it comes to economics. The United States wants to make sure that Canada is happy and make sure that Canada is included in this because Canada they see as a major ally. So they're going to create the Hyde Park Declaration, so allowing Lend-Lease to happen. with American materials, even if they're made in Canada, which means Canada is not going to be hurt economically. The United States is also going to fail to recognize Dutch French colonial possessions in Americas as Axis possessions. So when the Axis goes and takes over Dutch possessions, when we take over French possessions and take over the Netherlands and France in Europe, they're going to say that these countries or the colonies in North America are no longer, or in South America, are not part of their country, okay? There's still France as it was before. There's still Dutch as it was before. And this is to stay in lines with the Monroe Doctrine, which states, again, that North and South America closed to European colonialism. Again, this is an example of American diplomatic non-recognition, not necessarily getting involved, but stating, we're not going to accept you. You don't exist as far as I'm concerned. Argentina is going to dissent. Okay, they're going to be going in opposition to what the United States is saying here because they feel that this is simply going to be used by the Americans as an excuse to annex these territories and make them American. Now, there is some historical precedence behind that. If we're looking, for example, with Cuba after the Spanish-American War, while the United States didn't officially annex it, they did put a pretty large control over it. Looking at Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico as well after the Spanish-American War, where the Americans are like, hey, this is mine now. So there is some kind of precedence for the Argentinian dissent here. However, it ultimately is going to be kind of putting them on the opposite side of the rest of Latin and North America at this time. Now, we're going to get the Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs, the CIAA. Not the CIA, the CIAA. And this office's job is to promote hemispheric cooperation. So how do the American countries work with one another? They're going to seek to spread pro-American feelings in areas that have a large pro-fascist population. There are areas, particularly in like Argentina and Chile, that have a very large support for fascism. Okay, they like the policies of fascism. And this is something the Americans feel as a threat, because if these countries have a large pro-fascist population, they're going to be more inclined to support Italy and Germany and the Axis powers, which is going to be a threat to the United States, and it's going to be a threat to the Allies. They don't like this. They're going to make sure something happens. Additionally, they're going to be spreading this pro-American feelings in places that have a large German and Japanese immigrant population. So places like, for example, we're talking about Brazil, large German population. Peru has a large Japanese immigrant population. So we're going to make sure that these immigrants in these countries are loyal to the United States and not to their ancestral homeland. We do not want a bunch of Nazi and Japanese sympathizers in Latin America, because that's going to cause us a problem. Most Americans believe that Latin America should be defended, which is a major shift to American beliefs from even 10 years before. About 10 years before this, the vast majority of Americans would not have believed using their military to defend Latin America was a good idea. Now, at this point, they believe that the United States should intervene in Latin America to defend Latin American countries should they come under attack, particularly by the Axis powers. Now, this is simply going to show the full-out success of the good neighbor policy. It has been a major shift in policy. These countries are now really working with one another and making sure they're going to be defending one another. So they go from simply living next to each other to being really good friends. Major, major way of seeing the success of the good neighbor policy. Should you be asked about the good neighbor policy, that would be one good way to go ahead and answer that question. Now, the war in Europe meant no trade with Europe for Latin America. Just like the United Kingdom can't be trading with the rest of Europe, the same is going to be happening for Latin America, meaning the vast majority of goods from Latin America are going to be coming from the United States. So this is going to be good for the economy of the United States. It's also going to ensure that these countries are all working with one another, hemispheric cooperation, hence the title of this section. When the United States is going to enter war, the trade is going to become more challenging. So when the United States will ultimately get involved in World War II, it's going to be more difficult for them to be trading with Latin America because there's simply less goods going around. The United States is going to be more focused on their own war effort than the war effort of, say, Colombia. So therefore, they're going to really have a harder time with this trade, which is going to lead to a series of inflation in Latin America, which obviously is not a beneficial thing, particularly to the citizens living there. It's going to cause some economic problems, but that's kind of something that happens in times of war anyways, particularly when one country is tied heavily to another country, as we see here with Latin America and the United States. The United States is also going to the United States is also going to be placing their military in geographically important areas. So, for example, parts of Brazil, because it's the closest part of the Americas to North Africa and Europe. They're going to be placing their military in Panama to protect the canal. They're going to give funds to these areas as well to increase their own militaries, to make sure that the people from Panama can have their own strong military, to make sure the Brazilians can have their own strong military. Because again, if you protect the Americas is a way of protecting the United States. So the United States is going to be stationing their militaries in geographically important areas throughout Latin America. They're also going to be giving military or money to aid the military development of certain geographically important areas in Latin America. And then we're going to get the expansion of the Lynd Lease Act in 1941 to include the USSR. Now, this is going to simply show the anti-Nazi ideals of the United States of America. The United States of America is certainly far from being a Soviet or to being a socialist country, particularly in 1941, but they're willing to work with the socialist country simply because they don't view them as much of a threat as they view the Nazis. We've got to defeat the Nazis. Here's an additional way of defeating the Nazis. We've got to give everything we can to defeat the Nazis. Now, the action was against military, not ideals would lead to the United States ultimately entering the war. So the United States is really not getting as involved as they need to be doing to stop this spread from happening. The Japanese, meanwhile, are sitting over on the other side in the Pacific Ocean, kind of just getting ready to roll. And this is ultimately going to lead to the United States entering the war December 8th, 1941. Questions, comments, put it down below. Otherwise, I shall see you later. Good luck.